when I walk into, I've got my glasses on. I never wear my glasses on these things. This is the vanity of the man. They also reflect badly in the sense that the images in front of me reflect back on my glasses. I don't like the way it looks. You've caught me out in a vanity. When I walk into a supermarket for the first time, the very first thing I look at is the floor. Just walk in the door. As soon as I walk in the door, I look at the floor. If the floor is dirty, I walk right back out again. I will not do business with that supermarket. This is a matter of survival for me. My feeling is that if the floor is dirty, the manager is incompetent. And if the manager is incompetent, I can't possibly trust the food. I am paying that man to serve me up my own suicide, and that is insane. That's wrong. That's inappropriate. I won't do it. This is called reasoning by proxy. I'm using the proxy of the direct knowledge I have of the floor of that store. I am measuring the quality of the cleanliness of that floor, and I'm using that evaluation to evaluate the manager. I really know nothing about the manager. I've never seen the guy. I know nothing about him other than that he doesn't buff the floors of his store. But I know that in the training programs for all sorts of retail establishments, one of the things they burn into the young guys when they're young is buffing the floor. If you're a young guy in a store like that and you're in the management track and you want to move up, you're going to get really, really good at buffing the floor, and you're going to want to know why it matters that you buff the floor. And the reason that it matters is because it's marketing. It's my first impression of the store, and I understand what it means, and I use it to my advantage. And my using it to your advantage is to my advantage is to your disadvantage if your goal is to make that store busy and profitable. So they burn it into the young guys, and if the manager of that store didn't get it burned into him when he was a young guy, he didn't get any of the other philosophy that goes into managing a retail store proficiently, expertly, as a matter of pride and excellence. He didn't get any of that. I can tell by the floor. If you are good at quibbling with logic, I am. If you're good at quibbling with logic, you'll know that I am reasoning by a specious proxy, that my knowledge of the floor really tells me nothing at all about anything else. I could be 100% wrong about the manager, or it could just be a bad day, or he could be out sick and the store is running fine, but the guy who buffs the floor is out sick. What do I know? I really don't know. All I know is that the floor is dirty. That's all I know. And I'm using that proxy as a basis for making a decision, and as a matter of logic, it is easy to see that I could be completely wrong, that black swans do exist, and that when you say there are no black swans and you find one, then you're wrong. Duh, you're wrong. But it's not a matter of huge consequence to me. It's a matter of much greater consequence to me that I might be right about the manager than that I might occasionally be wrong about him. Because if I am occasionally wrong about him, he suffers a little bit and his company suffers a little bit. But if I am right about him, then I die, and I die forever. Being right is absolutely important, and being wrong is inconsequential. I have no real penalty here for being wrong, except for my time, and that's where an economist would jump in and say, "Oh no, but your time is a value." And if you're only going to that store to buy a Milky Way anyway, you're going to buy prepackaged food that has a sell-by date on it. If the package looks good, and the sell-by date is far enough in the future, what the heck? What do you got to lose? Especially if the price is right. That's not the way I think. I mean, you can think that way if you want to. Different people have different values, but one of my values is making incompetence suffer. I want incompetence to suffer and die, if possible. Because if they won't learn how to do the job they're doing, then they deserve to suffer and die. Just as any plant that decides to grow downward instead of upward, I'm sure that there is some percentage of plants, you know, somewhere between 50% and 1% of all seeds that are planted must grow upside down. I mean, all genetic variations are possible. The rare ones self-extinguish, but the rare ones are always popping up and self-extinguishing. If a plant decides that the most appropriate thing it can do is grow toward the center of the earth instead of toward the sun, then it deserves to suffer, it deserves to die. And my feeling is the same especially about bad managers, people who manage businesses badly. I wish they would all suffer and die immediately, but to the extent that I can encourage that process, I do. And again, the logician and the economist and who knows how many other academics would jump in to say, well, number one, the penalty I'm imposing upon this incompetent is inconsequential. He's unlikely to feel it. And number two, the penalty that I'm imposing upon myself by going to another store just for a dumbass Milky Way bar, that's a far worse penalty too. Again, I differ. my own satisfaction with my choices matters to me enough that I do not choose to make the unsatisfying choice, even when it might be more convenient. I do not choose to make the choice that's going to leave me feeling unhappy with myself going forward. I do not choose to see myself doing the wrong thing, even when there might be some argument to be made for doing the wrong thing instead of going out of my way to do the right thing. But really, the store and the manager and even the contents of the Milky Way package, all of those things are black boxes to me. I have no idea what's going on inside any one of those black boxes until I really tear them open and investigate. And the benefit for me in reasoning by this proxy that the dirty floor tells me that there's nothing worth buying in that store, there's no way I can profit by doing business with that store. I can only suffer loss, either a temporary loss, a short-term loss, or a loss in my own self-regard, or possibly the loss of my life. The only thing that I will reap from doing business with a bad businessman is my death, ultimately. Some portion of it in the near term. And the only way that I can pursue my own profit, the profit of my own values, is by shopping elsewhere. And so even though it's a black box, even though I really have no certain knowledge about what's going on in that black box, not in the store, not in the manager's head, and not inside the Milky Way bar, inside the package, or inside the chocolate for that matter, I have no way of knowing what's going on with any of this stuff. Yet the proxy satisfies me that I've made the right choice, and I just move on. Reasoning by proxy in that way is essentially a cargo cult. When we use the term cargo cult, we always use it in derision, and we're always making fun of those ignorant savages over there. A cargo cult is a religion among very primitive people who come into contact with, for a short while, with much, much, much higher technology, and then that technology is suddenly withdrawn, and the primitive people who are left behind are stuck trying to figure out how to get it back. All through the South Pacific, there are little tiny cargo cults on little tiny islands where people are waiting for the U.S. Navy or the U.S. Air Force to return and bring back all of its magical technology. These islands were temporarily occupied by military forces in World War II. When the war was over, whoever didn't die went home, and whatever they left behind got left behind, and all that stuff that got left behind was amazing magical wealth to people who knew nothing about what it was, how it came into existence, how to work it, how to get more, how to live that kind of life. It was magic to them. It was magic just as if, you know, the space aliens of Star Wars suddenly came to the Earth and put on a show for us. You know, it's technology to them, it's magic to us. And this was obviously all technology to the Navy and the Air Force, the Marines who were on these islands. All this stuff was just everyday technology to be expected, but it was all completely magical to the islanders, and they built religions around them, and those religions are called cargo cults. They are praying for the cargo to come back. Every religion, we can easily see from this, every religion is a cargo cult. Every religion is an attempt to get something by a means by which it can't be gotten. I'm going to pray for rain. No, that's not how rain comes about. That's not what makes rain happen. And if it happens to rain subsequent to your praying for it, this is the post-hoc fallacy. Our friend the logician will be very happy to shoot that argument down, because it's just dumb. It's not the way that rain gets caused, and praying for it all day and all night will not cause rain. And it's easy to see that every religion basically takes that form. Another thing that we associate with cargo cults is the attempted emulation of the behavior that seemed to bring on all of the godlike magic in the past. So cargo cults will lay out airstrips and have pretend signalmen trying to guide the airplanes in on their pretend airstrips, because the airplanes are going to bring all the cargo. That's how the gods deliver the cargo. And a religion is like a cargo cult in that respect also, because the palliative events, the supplicating events, the events that are allegedly going to produce the magic cannot possibly produce the magic. And most often they consist not so much of virtue, but as pantomimes or emulations of virtue, much in the same way that a signalman holding two sticks is not going to cause an imaginary airplane to land on a completely inadequate airstrip. Every religion is a cargo cult. But every claim to any sort of knowledge without a process of investigation or discovery is also a cargo cult. In other words, any claim that you know what's inside a black box without having investigated the contents of the black box is in some respects a cargo cult. If the proxy that you're using is reasonable and accurate, your decisions, the decisions you make on the basis of that black box will be correct. And if your proxy is unreasonable and or inaccurate, your decisions will be in error, and you really have no way of knowing from the outside which is going to be true, because until you know how the black box works, you can't really predict what's going to happen. You can predict in the aggregate. You can run 1,000 tests or 1,000,000 tests, and if your proxy is reasonably accurate, a dirty floor indicates bad meat, unhealthy meat. If you look at stores that have dirty floors and also look at stores that have bad meat and compare the two, you will find those two factors together more often than you'll find them apart. In other words, stores with really clean floors will typically not have bad meat, and stores with really dirty floors will be much more likely to have bad meat, but much more consequentially, stores with bad meat will almost always have dirty floors. A proxy is not a bad way of making the decision, it's just an inaccurate way of making the decision. It's an inelegant way of making the decision, and in every important respect, it's ultimately an erroneous way of making a decision, because you're not making the decision based on actual knowledge, but on probabilities of knowledge. You're making the decision based on the subjunctive interpretation of past statistical data and associating that with reality. And depending on the decision you're making, if it's just a Milky Way bar, one decision or the other probably isn't too consequential. But if you're talking about the destruction of your marriage, for instance, maybe it matters a little bit more to know what's going on in that black box and not to assume that you know something based on a conjecture about the unknown contents of an unexamined black box. Oh yes, we are talking about epistemology. It's Sunday morning, it's 10 o'clock, it's Greg Swann, it's the Church of Splendor. What else should we be talking about if not epistemology? And let me ask you a question. Where in the world can you go to a church other than this one to talk about epistemology on a Sunday morning? In a sense, every word, every sentence, every image, every description, every menu, every list, every photograph, every portrait, every painting, every poem, every song, every mathematical equation, every interpretive dance, every bad rendition of the 12-bar blues like this one, every work of the mind is a map to reality. It's a way of thinking of it, that every work of the mind is a map to reality, is an attempt to describe reality in a way that I understand it better and I can find what I'm looking for better, and possibly in a way that I can share it with you so that you can find what you're looking for better. Every piece of father tongue, every type of father tongue, every message in father tongue is a map to reality. But the map is not reality. The map is not the territory. The map is not reality. The map cannot comprehensively represent reality without itself being reality. So the map necessarily omits some details and necessarily exaggerates certain others. This is its benefit as a map to the Hollywood Bowl will be quite a bit different from a map to the Lost Dutchman gold mine. And the reason that they're different is because my objective in using a particular map is different. If I'm going to a concert, I want a map that shows me how to navigate traffic in Los Angeles, and if I'm looking for a gold mine, I need something to keep me busy while I'm failing to find it. And in that respect, every map is the sacred apocryphal document of a black box cult, of a cargo cult. Every map, every message, every little bit of father tongue is a map to something that I say exists that may or may not exist, and that you need to investigate firsthand in order to find out if it does exist. I said there's a gold mine. You paid $50 for my map to that gold mine. All you got is a map. Is there a gold mine? Isn't there a gold mine? If there is a gold mine, is this a good map to it? If this is a good map to the gold mine, am I capable of following it? When I get there, will there be 10,000 other people who also paid $50 for a map to nothing? You have to figure all that out yourself. All you got's a map. Any map. It doesn't matter which map it is. Any map is potentially deceptive. Even if it's not intentionally deceptive, it is potentially deceptive, because no matter what scruples I took in making that map, I can't count on you to exercise a countervailing and perfectly correspondent scrupulousness in reading it. And so it can lead you to the wrong place, even if I did my best to lead you to the right place. But what if I didn't? What if I'm not trying to lead you to the right place? What if I'm deliberately trying to lead you to the wrong place? So we picked on religion already. Let's pick on academia instead. Because as far as I'm concerned, the purpose of scholarly life right now, the purpose of academia, the purpose of the official academy, the professoriate, the purpose of that is nothing but deception. They're not building inaccurate maps, they're not building inadvertently inaccurate maps, and they're not even really building deliberately inaccurate maps. They used to build deliberately inaccurate maps, but now they're building maps to nothing and nowhere and selling them at 10 times the price. The sole purpose is deception. The sole purpose is to lead you into misery and poverty, into pain, suffering, doubt, loneliness, despair. Look around you. What do you see? I'm not saying it's everything. I know it's not. It's certainly not the case in my life, and it's not the case in a lot of lives, but in a whole lot of lives it is. Pain, suffering, doubt, uncertainty, misery, despair, loneliness, broken relationships, enduring rancor, and children who inherit all of that ugliness, and that's their inheritance from their family life. And so what are they going to build out of that? You see that a lot. You see that everywhere. It's all around you. And if it's all around you, it's because somebody wanted it that way. Somebody led those people. We were a rich and prosperous people 100 years ago. We weren't as rich as we are now, but we were much more prosperous in the sense that we husbanded our resources so much more wisely, our physical and our capital resources, but especially our moral resources. We were much better at husbanding our moral resources 100 years ago. And in consequence, the proportion of flourishing families to broken families, failed families, tragic, ruined families, the proportion of flourishing families to ruined families was the opposite of what it was today. Mostly flourishing families, no matter how rich, no matter how poor, mostly flourishing families, and very few ruined families, and now we have mostly ruined families, almost none of them flourishing. And the cause for that cannot be religion. God is dead, said Nietzsche, and the Academy will certainly agree. The Academy will say, no, we were in charge, and they were. They were the bosses. They were the ones setting the terms and conditions of the moral philosophy that would be used to guide the people of North America, Western Europe, Japan, all of the countries of the world that were once rich and are now steadily becoming more and more poor, and not so much poor in matter. We're richer in matter every day, but poor in spirit. Less intelligent, less educated, less hardworking, less assiduous, less productive, less abstemious, less thrifty. They are, in every way that you could name, every virtue you could name, we are less the husbands of those virtues than we were 100 years ago. And that the reason for this is because we have listened to the very bad advice of academics. So I will say that every church is a cargo cult, but as far as I'm concerned, every field of academic study is also a cargo cult. And frankly, the reason for this is obvious, because nobody ever discovered anything in a library. Nobody ever discovered anything from a questionnaire. The great proxy for science in the Western world right now is testimony-based science, is questionnaire-based science. And so when you read a headline on the internet or in the newspaper, magazine, or whatever, that headline is always something based on a study. Study says this, study says that, new study proves this, new study argues that. And all of those studies, almost all of them, are based on testimony. They're based on giving people questionnaires, and the people fill out the questionnaires and hand them back in. And they tabulate the results and turn it into a press release, and the press release turns into a headline. This is how science is made. This is how tax-funded science is made. Without the taxpayer, none of this happens, because nobody gives a rat's ass. Whatever the question was on the questionnaire, nobody would give a shit if he had to pay for that alleged study with his own money. Nobody would pay for that. Only the taxpayer is stupid enough to pay for that. But the ridiculous thing about it is that every word is potentially deceptive. Every word is potentially deceptive, and a lot of words are intentionally deceptive. A lot of the things that people say are, to one degree or another, are deceptive, are lies. They may not be outright bald-faced lies, but there's a shading and a coloring and a wishing and a hoping. And you understand. You're a good fella, aren't you? We can forgive each other's minor transgressions, can't we? Come on, let's just be buddies. And that's the way people fill out questionnaires. You've done it yourself. You filled out a questionnaire that you lied on every question, or you didn't really give a rat's ass about it anyway. You just wanted to get it over, so you said A, B, C, D, A, B, C, D, A, B, C, D, all the way through, or something like that. You know you have lied on a questionnaire. You need to examine your mind to decide what makes you the unique and special snowflake in the universe, that you're the only one who ever lied on a questionnaire. And guess what? Now you understand that everyone lies on questionnaires all the time, and now you understand that the basis, the absolute rock-solid scientific basis of this science is complete bullshit. Bullshit. Useless. It is a tabulation of lies, and what percentage of the responses are lies and what percentage of any individual response was a lie? You have no way of assigning a value to that number. You have no way of establishing a proxy for that ignorance. I don't know that the manager's an idiot, but I know his floor is dirty. It suggests he might be. I know you're lying on my questionnaire. What is the veracity of any given response? I have zero way of knowing. I cannot establish the veracity of any answer, and so a tabulation of the aggregate of answers is just a tabulation of unknown lies. Lies of unknown extent, unknown quantity, unknown importance. I know nothing except that I am being lied to, and in fact, whenever I ask a question, it's one of the things that should be in my mind is, am I being lied to? More recently we've met. The longer I've known you and the more reason I've had to suspect your testimony, the dirtier your floor is. I don't have to be right. I just have to survive being wrong. I don't have to outrun the bear, I just have to outrun you. The other thing that's cute about testimony-based science is that the questionnaires are only given to college students. College students are overwhelmingly INTJs on the Briggs-Myers, INTPs. In other words, they're good students. They're real good note-takers. They're also overwhelmingly high Cs on the DISC system. They're really good note-takers. They're excellent note-takers. Good spreadsheet builders. Good experiment designers. They're excellent questionnaire writers. You ask a series of questions of people who are just exactly like you, and if they give you honest answers, they give you a real honest reflection of you. They don't tell you about anything else. Testimony-based science is essentially narcissistic. It's students studying students. And as soon as the students take their tests out to the real world, they find out that they didn't know what they were testing for in the first place. They have no idea what they're testing for, because real people decide things differently. Students decide things on the basis of a student's mind and a student's exigencies, the exigencies of life, which are almost unrelated to real life. They say it themselves. When I get to the real world, they say it all the time. They live in an unreal world and they sit around all day measuring an unreal world and reporting the results of their unreal world. Good luck with that. We'll know that the taxpayers have recovered their insanity when we put all of these people in another line of work. They hang out at Starbucks all day long now. We just need to put them on the other side of the counter. Another great big black box in the academic world is the subject of intelligence as such. Intelligence is viewed as one huge black box, and anything that exhibits the output of the black box called intelligence is considered to have been intelligence. And so if the dancing bear is dancing, then it's doing the same thing that the bride and groom are doing. They are also dancing. And if the bride and groom are dancing, then the cute little 2.5-year-old girl who sees them dancing and figures out that if she mimics that motion, she'll get some attention too, she's also dancing. And up the street, there's a pretty little girl at a titty bar who is making mad, passionate love to a chromium pole. She's also dancing. Dancing is the black box, and everything that looks like dancing is dancing, and the bear is doing what it was trained to do to get a treat, and the bride and groom are pantomiming for the crowd what they're going to do alone later, and the little girl is trying to get attention, and the stripper is trying to pay the rent. But their motivations don't matter. What's inside the black box doesn't matter. What matters is dancing. All dancing is dancing. All intelligence is intelligence. You can produce a dolphin that can count to 4. Big fucking deal. Your dolphin doesn't know anything at all about counting, doesn't know anything about quantity, doesn't know anything about math, doesn't have any reason to count anything at all. Has zero motivation. The bear has no motivation to dance. The bear is not dancing. The bear doesn't know what dancing is, wouldn't know how to dance if it suddenly developed the urge, and doesn't know that the stuff that it's doing is dancing, has no way of acquiring that knowledge. This is not intelligence, this is training. And failing to distinguish the two is a bright line epistemological error. I am taking on all of biology, neuroscience, evolutionary science, but also all of computer science and artificial intelligence. The Turing, Minsky, Papert ideas of artificial intelligence are a joke. The output of a system that looks like intelligence is not intelligence. It's one of two things. It is either the random functioning of the machine, or it is canned human intelligence. A chess program does not beat a human player. A team of human programmers beats a human player by means of a chess-playing interface. There is no such thing as artificial intelligence. Intelligence is not a black box. It is absolutely easy to understand if you distinguish among types of intelligence, if you recognize that training is not intelligence in the way that we mean intelligence, that only informed discretion, only conceptually conscious volitionality is intelligence, and everything else is either a trained emulation or a coincidental distraction. But in both cases, dancing bears and software, it's real easy to prove the error in the underlying epistemology, and the way to do it is with guile. Come across the ELIZA-like program that's allegedly going to mimic human responses, you just keep pushing it until you break it. You just push for the outer envelope of the responses it's capable of making until you break it. And in the same way, if you take a dog, an ordinary adult dog, just, Heinz 57 a mutt, very intelligent, extremely intelligent. Dogs are very, very smart among mammals, among living organisms, period. Dogs can be trained to do a lot of really interesting things, And a dog pattern matching is an analog to inference. It's not really inference, but it's like inference by means of a roll-top desk. A dog can categorize certain sensory cues and can draw inferential conclusions that are accidentally correct. And so when the dog hears you go for the keys, he knows it's time to campaign to go for a ride. He doesn't know that he's going to get to go for a ride. If he knew with absolute certainty that he was going to get to go for a ride, he'd probably start campaigning earlier because he'd be looking at an earlier proxy signal. But hearing the keys is the proxy signal to your dog to start campaigning to go for a ride. That's not conceptualization, that's just pattern matching. And that's how animals can be trained, is because they're capable of pattern matching. And you can play hide the ball with the dog. It's a very fun game to play with the dog. See the ball, get the ball, see the ball, get the ball, get the ball, get the ball. Dog gets all excited, tries to get the ball. You snap it behind your back. Hide the ball, right? Find the ball, find the ball. Then the dog runs until he runs around and finds the ball and starts yipping and yapping to get the ball. And you say, oh, hide the ball, and you bring it back around to the front. And it takes a second, and then the dog starts looking, and it finds the ball again. Okay, play that game again and again and again until the dog has gotten it. The dog has really got the game down, and you got it behind your back. He's hide the ball, and you bring it back around, and when you bring it back around, you stuff it under your T-shirt. Do this. Try this. Do this at home. You can do this. The dog will not be able to find the ball. The dog saw the ball in front of your stomach. The dog saw the ball behind your back. The dog knows you got the ball. The dog is barking at the ball. It wants the ball. It sees that ball. When you put it under your shirt, the dog can't see the ball. And it doesn't believe that it's there. The dog has an incredible sense of smell. Unbelievable. We got a bloodhound. The bloodhounds have 53 square inches of olfactory nerve. We're talking about tens of thousands of times better sense of smell than you have, really, proportionally. The dog knows by its sense of smell where the ball is, but doesn't believe it because it doesn't see it, and therefore it doesn't react in the same way. You have found the limits of that dog's inferential ability. If you want to call what it's doing inference, the inference stops as soon as the fact pattern no longer makes sense. That's a singularity for a dog. That's what a singularity really is. Scientists talk all the time about singularities, and they make you think they're talking about something in reality, but what they're really talking about is mentation. They're talking about what they don't understand. The model breaks down. That's what a singularity is, where the model breaks down. Where does the model exist? It exists in here. The universe is not a model. The map is not the territory. The model is not the reality. The model broke down. The defect is with the model, not with reality. But in any case, once you've done that with your dog enough times to know that the game will play out the same way, that as soon as you hide that ball under your shirt, the dog will not be able to find it. Now I want you to go find a kid who's 10 or 11 months old. Can stand up, he can play this game, not as good as the dog, but he plays the game the same way and with the same enthusiasm. He just doesn't have the coordination. And you can play that game with this kid, and he will run around your back and find the ball, and he will run around and find the ball in front, and he will run around and find the ball, and you put it under your shirt, and he will not be able to find it. In just exactly the same way that the dog won't be able to find it, except he doesn't have the advantage of a superior sense of smell. He's really only judging by what he sees, and what he sees is the ball has disappeared. It's vanished. So now go see that kid again when he's 13 or 15 months old. Give him a few months to grow up. You were able to fool him. This is guile. You were able to fool him. You were able to fool the dog. You were able to fool the kid. 13 or 15 months, you will not be able to fool that kid. He will see the shape of the ball under your shirt, and he will know that that's the ball, and the dog will never, never, never make that inference. The dog is incapable of making that inference. And we have now established, at 13 months or so, a bright line distinction between the human mind and the minds of ordinary mammals, the minds of really every other living organism. Their brains are insufficient to do the things that a 13-month-old child can do easily without father tongue. The child has no father tongue at that point. The child has no real speech. He has words, he has babble, and he has signals that he can understand, but he understands them the same way that the dog understands them. I say, Dusty, let's go for a ride, and the dog is at my side. Yip, 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 yip. That's the proof positive proxy. He knows he's going. The child is very much like a dog, except the child is becoming like a human being, and that difference is right there at 13 months. And that's how you can test for real intelligence, is by testing for guile. It's not absolutely guaranteed. It's not guaranteed that trying to fool a man that you won't successfully fool him, but you will easily fool an animal or a machine in no time flat. You will easily find a way to fool them, because you can just probe for the limits of their inability to engage in actual cognition, actual ratiocination, actual rationality, actual appropriate reasoning with respect to facts that you understand comprehensively and in complete detail. It's easy to see the difference, and it's easy to test for it. It's easy to break this stuff because it's all faulty, and the reason that it's faulty is because the map is faulty. Intelligence is not a black box. But guile is interesting just by itself. I told you a few weeks ago that poetry is leadership. I demonstrated that the leadership that is poetry, while it can be expressed in father tongue, in overt notation systems like poetry or like music or like dance, the leadership that is father tongue can be encoded in some notation system, but the primal notation system for poetry, for leadership, would have been affected mother tongue. In other words, mother tongue is an authentic emotional response, authentic bodily signaling common to all organisms, and the first form of poetry, poetry as leadership, poetry to persuade something to do something you wouldn't otherwise have done, I think was probably an affected mother tongue display. It was pretend challenge behavior. It was that the guy didn't intend to follow up on. He just wanted you to think he would. And that's guile. Guile is an enacted false proxy. You are enacting a false proxy in order to induce someone to make an incorrect decision. When we're playing poker and I'm dealt ace-king suited, I'm going to limp in on the flop. Limp in to see the flop. I don't want to advertise that I got a strong hand. To the contrary, I want to look kind of weak. And when the flop comes diamond, diamond, heart, I got 4 diamonds, I'm headed for a flush. Again, I'm going to bet weak on the flop. And I'm only really going to push the action when I've made the flush. I'm going to look weak until then, and maybe if you're looking stupid, if you're betting stupidly, I may let you bet stupidly into me and limp in the whole way. I'm deliberately looking weak because I know I'm strong and you don't. I'm presenting a false proxy to you. This is guile. I am deliberately misleading you. I'm presenting a deliberately misrepresentative map of the universe to you, and hoping that you'll make a mistake on that basis. And we have established what guile is in every possible respect. This is a fundamental definition of guile. Guile is an enacted false proxy. False proxy doesn't make you make the mistake. It just encourages you to, by making you think that you've decided on a sound basis when the basis was really unsound. But go back to the logician. Every decision made on the basis of proxy, any particular decision that you make on the basis of a proxy is necessarily faulty because you lack knowledge. Your decision is based on an inference about knowledge that you have, and that inference is about knowledge that you don't have. You are making a decision in the absence of certainty. You are making a decision based on your feelings about probability. And chances are your feelings about probability aren't so far wrong as to result in your death, and not so far wrong as to substantially inhibit your growth and prosperity. And so it's not a bad way to go. You come up over the hilltop and you look ahead and you see brake lights. You see a lot of brake lights. Well, it could be that's nothing, just a temporary little nothing, just a cop sitting underneath an overpass and everybody's tapping the brakes in the hopes that they got under 65 before they got to him. That could be the reason for those brake lights, or it could be a big accident. If it's a big accident, it can cost you 20, 30 minutes, whereas getting off on the surface streets is going to cost you 10 minutes. Depending on how things have gone for you in the past, that's how you're going to decide that. But you're either wasting 20 minutes or wasting 10. One way or another, you're choosing a waste of time, and you're hoping you're choosing the right waste of time. You're choosing to lose either way. And you're trying to choose the lesser loss. We will come back to this one because it's interesting to me. I talked about it with respect to the metaphysics of the garbage dump, the conviction that the churchman says all of reality is really just hell and you can only get to heaven by going through hell, and the academic says all of reality is just entropy, and if you are temporarily accidentally alive, this will be cured in due course and you will be bound by the law of entropy just like everything else. When you violate the law of entropy, science is going to kill you. So we'll come back to it, because in that respect, I mean, death is a false proxy. The purpose of life is life. Death is the end of it, absolutely. But the purpose of life is life. When somebody sets something down before you, is your first question, how do I work it or how do I break it? We're going to come back to this. Not today, some other Sunday. Another big black box that shows up in the news all the time is the middle class. There's this thing called the middle class, and it does this and it does that. It lives in single-family homes, and it drives 2 or more automobiles, and it sends its kids to good high schools and good colleges, and it has a retirement plan, and it mows its own lawn. That middle class, that's an amazing thing. We have no idea what's in there. I mean, I'm naming the contents, but I'm not really naming the process, because it's a black box. The middle class is a black box, and if you want more people in the middle class, then make some college loans available, because going to college is how you get in the middle class. And if you want some more people in the middle class, then make it really easy to get a home loan, because dang, homeownership is the middle class. No, 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 no. The middle class is a whole bunch of values that are inculcated in children from before they are born. Is mommy reading 1 fish, 2 fish, red fish, blue fish to her lap? The middle class is an enormous number of habits and behaviors that are cultivated over time, and especially when children are very, very young. And, those habits are not cultivated. You cannot cause their effect later. The seed grows up brilliant. We love it that the seed grew up toward the light instead of down toward its doom. The seed grew up, but it's the cultivation of that seed, the husbandry of that seed, that's going to make it a strong, productive, beautiful, thriving plant. And the absence of that cultivation will result in a stunted plant, and you will not make a stunted plant thrive later by throwing extra fertilizer at it, by stealing the actual proceeds of the middle class. Is the wealth, the excess wealth that families create for their own purposes, for their own needs, for their own interests, for their own ends. They produce more wealth than they consume, and that excess wealth is stolen. They are caused to be less healthy. The healthy plants are caused to be less healthy in order to throw that wealth away on plants that can never be healthy because they weren't cultivated properly from the very beginning. Don't despair. I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about trying to do this from the outside. If you do it from the inside, you can do anything, but you can't fix it from the outside. You cannot fix a broken life from the outside. You can only fix it from the inside. So then we get to self-improvement, which is another great big black box. So we got to have self-improvement. Your life sucks. Well, you can fix that. Let's get involved in self-improvement. For the first thing, let's focus on your career. Let's really master the arcane details of your career. Book after book after book that you buy on Friday and read for a little while on the treadmill on Sunday morning, and you never pick up again. Maybe 1 book every Friday. You're keeping the publishing industry in business by buying books that you never read, but you never do read them. Another one is health. Got to pick up Men's Health magazine. Got to get that 6-pack ad. Got to learn that latest pickup trick so I can get me a piece of pussy I didn't earn. And then the ultimate cargo cult of the self-improvement movement is the idea of self-esteem. People have self-esteem, have good health, they work out. People have self-esteem, are very confident when it comes to sex. People have self-esteem, are very successful in their careers. That if you want to be a person of self-esteem, then what you need to do is emulate the proxy behaviors of people who have self-esteem. Again, this will not work. It's not pumping iron that makes you strong. It's being strong on the inside that makes you pump iron. It's not being attractive that makes you lovable. It's being lovable that makes you attractive. When you understand that attractive means somewhere between 1 and 100 years and not 1 and 100 seconds. Anybody can be attractive for 100 seconds. Try being irresistible to somebody for 70 years. Being the only face he wants to see when he dies. The only man she wants holding her hand when she dies. That's an attractive man. And so we get to the black box that matters to us most, I think, and that's marriage. Oh, marriage is a difficult thing. Marriage is a terrible. Marriage is give and take. Marriage is this. Marriage is that. Marriage is broken. Divorce laws, child support arrangements, custody, visitation. Always money, 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 money. Marriage is broken. Marriage is an institution. I would argue that marriage can't be broken because marriage is the means by which we create the next generation of parents. And the way we raise our children now, we're not raising parents, and we can see that by the fact that they don't have any children. We're kind of lucky that maybe they're not, because until they manage to get fixed from the inside out, until they repair themselves, until they practice real self-improvement, maybe they're not going to be great parents anyway. So maybe that's a good thing. But the kids who are having babies are the ones who are the product of these wonderful families where they don't have self-esteem as something that they put on like a costume. They have self-esteem because they live that way. They're not in the middle class because somebody gave them a government loan, but because they live that way. The testimony can be trusted because it matters to them a great deal. They don't mislead you. We call these people grown-ups. These people are adults. Fewer and fewer of them, too. Fewer flourishing people, fewer happy marriages, fewer adults. Lots and lots of adult babies, but very few adults. But marriage is not broken. Marriages are broken. And broken marriages are easy to fix because a marriage is broken because dad stopped driving. That's the reason. That is the only reason. The only reason the marriage is broken is because dad stopped driving, and as soon as he decides to drive again, he will fix it. His job is either to get in the minivan or to get out of it. But if he decides to get back behind the wheel of that minivan, that marriage will be happy, it will be prosperous, it will be successful. The children will do better from then on. Everything will be very, very, very middle class, because what makes a middle class family is a father. An active, eager, intelligent, involved, committed father. Because it's the father who's driving that family. And if he's not driving it, it's going to wreck. Marriage is not a black box. Neither are you. You are not a black box to yourself. You are a black box to everyone else. Truthfully. As scrupulous as you are about faithfully representing the truth of reality and the truth of your interior state, nevertheless, the map that you present to the rest of the world in your behavior is potentially misleading in the same way that every other map is potentially misleading. That no matter how careful you are to be accurate, the buyer buys what the buyer buys. The seller sells what he thinks he sold, but what got bought was what the buyer bought. And what the buyer saw of you is the only impression the buyer has of what the buyer saw of you. You can't fix that immediately, and you can't fix it completely over time. But what we get by our relationships with people, by our one-on-one recurring relationships with other people, is we get a better understanding of the map by which they live by, and so we understand the ways in which that map is less than perfectly representative, and the ways in which that map is maybe hinting at things that are not fully represented but are nevertheless the case. I mean, you know, I learned to read my wife's face as good as a man can read a face. I read my wife's face as good as a man can do it. My guess is that my wife reads my own face a hell of a lot better than I read hers, but all of these things are things that can only happen as a result of time. The relationship can only exist on the basis of recurring transactions, repeated recurring transactions, and the more those transactions there are, and the more intense they are, the more you're going to understand about the other person, but you never really will understand that other person perfectly, and there will come a time when they will surprise you, and if it's a pleasant surprise, that's wonderful, and it's an unpleasant surprise, that might be the end of the relationship. That might be the point at which you decide, you know what? I thought we were on the same page, but it turns out we're not. I thought we were going the same way, but it turns out we're not. I thought we were working from the same map, but we're not. And that will be the end of the relationship. But really, that's the only good reason for the relationship to end. If you're both headed the same way and one of you is dragging down the progress, Dad, my answer is it's the pedal on the right. The pedal on the left is for not getting anywhere. It's the pedal on the right. You put your foot on the pedal on the right, and your whole family is going to get where you want it to go. And if you don't, it won't. I have a lot more, a lot more to talk about this, but I don't want to go on for 2 hours when I've taken the best part of one. I wrote this morning, and it's maybe where we're headed next week. Maybe it's what we'll talk about next week. But what I wrote was, it's not that you're completely full of guile. Where you get yourself into trouble is that you're never all the way empty of it. It's not that your map is a lie. It's just that it's not all the way the truth. And one thing that you can do right away and consistently that will make a great big difference in how you husband your own life, how you husband your children, how you husband your spouse, how you husband your wealth and your resources, how you husband your intellectual capital, and how you husband your splendor. Something that you can do that will make an immediate and remarkable difference is to make every effort to leave the guile out of your maps. To make your representations of reality as truthful as you can make them. And to leave the lies out. Leave all the lies out. Even the harmless little lies. Even the little light white lies. Leave all the lies out. Tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth. Stand by it. Bless you. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you could join me. I will be glad to talk to you again next week.